Chapter 22. The only road into Forge ended at the calm waters of First Fulton Lake. North from there it was more wilderness, more trees, and more cold. A few wagon trails cut here and there through the woods, but traveling north beyond Forge with any kind of efficiency was done over the water. The old native routes strung lakes together by slow flowing rivers and streams. If the water was high enough, you could paddle clear up to Lake Champlain and up into Canada without having to ever take your canoe out of the water. A good 150 miles. In the winter, you could do the same over the frozen ice by foot or even by horse and sled. The road south out of town would bring you into Utica after a couple days of riding. Turning right would bring you into Albany, 50 miles to the west. A turn left would eventually turn you south, and a couple 100 miles later, you'd find yourself on the shores of the Hudson looking across at New York City. On horse, a good 10 days in all. The summers were cool, while both spring and fall were muddy. Most of the logging happened in the winter, when the ground was frozen and logs would slide out of the woods and onto the ice of the lakes more easily. The spring thaw brought high water through the rivers and streams, and those logs could be floated down to the mill. Years ago, as the Jacks cut a path through the forest toward the southern shore of Fulton Lake, they widened the road enough for 2 wagons to pass. They carefully chose plots for small homesteads, cabins, and a pasture or two, each space tucked and protected against the pines. While the soil didn't lend itself to more than basic farming, the timber traded and sold well enough that the town could sustain itself, and Forge emerged. By then, about a dozen buildings lined the road from the southern part of town leading up to the lake. The first was a 2-story home owned by the Goodsells. They also built a carriage barn a few dozen yards off the back, with an ice house between the two. A half-mile north, the newest building was only 100 yards from the water's edge, Cohen's Stock and Staple. Many of the buildings hosted a shop of some kind on the first floor and humble living quarters on the second. The winters were so cold and snowy that living and working in the same house simply made sense. This was the case for the tannery, bakery, blacksmith, and barber, among others. Cabins dotted the shores of the lake, and some faced the branch of the small river leading south. Most of the cabins belonged to the witches. Some were for living in, while others were places for ceremony or study. There was no church in town. This was fine with most folk. After all, there was no mention in the Bible of beastly creatures created by the full moon. Yet beastly creatures had a hand in each of the townsfolk's lives. The Jacks and witches insisted upon a code of truth, and found it built trust faster than faith did. Adhering to the code was a small price to pay for the townspeople to always have wood in the winter, witches to heal any ailment, and powerful men to keep the town safe from danger all year round. The only other expectations of the Jacks and witches made of the townsfolk was to be well read and to keep a regular, if even minimal, diary. As such, they kept a strong collective chronicle of the town's history. Records of weather, ice out, migrations, timber and crop yields, as well as the general goings-on, made a good study for the future, or so they were told. As one would imagine, the barber always had the most cutting gossip, while Mabel, at the bakery, would record the number of pies she baked, but never revealed her recipes. Everyone understood that anything worth doing was worth at least making a quick note about, and all put quill or pencil to paper on a regular basis. Naturally, then, the schoolhouse was the main fixture of the town. It was as most schools were of the day, consisting of a large room with an old blackboard, worn-in desks and chairs, and a wood stove in the corner. The bookshelves were so full there was talk of building a library next door soon. A smaller back room of the schoolhouse held wood storage and other necessities. It even had an in-house just off the back room, in addition to the traditional outhouse a ways off, to save the children from having to trudge through the snow in the winter. Other than the comings and goings of a few souls, or an occasional new house or small building going up, not much had changed in Forge for a good century or so. How much Arthur's death and Sam's arrival would alter things was hard to tell. The townsfolk were excited to be a part of history, while the Jacks and witches wanted to be sure their small piece of the world stayed as true to their roots and as peaceful as possible. Even if the future could never be foretold, one change does, inevitably, lead to another.